どちらにも耐性があるけれどもね。
Oh, it's not gonna work. Oh, shit. Knowing ourselves is the first condition. It's very important to cultivate self-awareness. But that once we do that, we also need to rely on one another. Because no one can walk this path of life by ourselves. Life, this game of life, this trippiness, this uncertainties of life is not a one-man sport. This is a team sport, just like this second part of the main tournament. Hello friends, my name is Benoit Kim, a UPenn educated psychotherapist. In today's video, episode 24, you can expect to learn about the symbolic representations of the labyrinth or the dungeon. What does it mean to confront the self, the well-known psychological doppelganger phenomena, and much, much more. Assassination Zero is the sponsored tier of today's video. I appreciate your support and shout out to the best patron family. And without further ado, let's tune in. Oh, very ominous beginning. What do they see? Who are they facing? Oh, themselves, right. They're facing the replicas. Remember the shock from last episode of Dunkin' Donuts' expression when he realized he's facing the replica of Frieren the Slayer? I would shatter my bottle on the spot. Yep. Same, dude, same. Oh, even the music. Wow, that facial expression though. So I want to start off with a few analysis in continuation of episode 23. First, I want to talk about the symbolic representations of the labyrinth. I think the labyrinth represents our subconscious psyche, the unconscious. The reason why work doesn't really stop and the reason why healing is often a lifelong journey is because we don't know what we don't know. And when we think and feel like we've worked and resolved certain aspects of our trauma, mental health symptoms, more will surface based on new circumstances in life. And that's the reason why Labyrinth has many different layers. There's different traps, different detours. All of these symbolically represent the hidden consciousness, the traps, our unhelpful tendencies, behavioral patterns that must be interrupted and broken. Just like Verbel's, effort to reinvent himself by only committing to necessary killing and sparing the innocent lives when it does not necessitate his action to do so. So I think the labyrinth since the get-go represents our psyche, the subconscious. Beneath the consciousness is everything we are somewhat aware of, which is the subconscious, and what we are completely unaware of. And that's the concept of also repression versus suppression. Definition right here. A lot of people use these two terms colloquially, loosely, but they're actually very different psychologically. Repression is when we are unconsciously repressing the traumatic experiences, the parts of ourself, the shadow self, when it's too burdensome to deal with it. So what do? We go towards alcohol, drugs, and other unhelpful coping skills. And there's no judgments. We do what we gotta do to survive. But these unhealthy coping is unsustainable in the long term and has detrimental relational impact and health impact. So that's repression. But then there's suppression, is when we are knowingly, which is the subconscious and conscious, knowingly suppressing parts of ourselves that we are not yet ready to deal with based on your circumstances. For example, when a single parent is too busy working 3 different jobs, trying to feed and survive with 2 children at home, that single mother doesn't really have the privilege or the capacity to work on her trauma, so to speak. She could have been sexually molested as a child, or other horrible tragedies and trauma. But she needs to survive. Maslow's hierarchy. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom of the hierarchy is the survival needs, basic necessities. So some people might suppress because they don't have the ability or the capacity to deal with it yet. So that's suppression and repression. And I think we will see some of that manifestation in this episode with the labyrinth and different parties confronting and facing different replicas of themselves.
あのダンジョンの主を水鏡の悪魔 シュピーゲルと呼んでいる。賢者エービヒの英雄譚に出てくる神話の時代の魔物だ。
Spiegel?
シュピーゲルは
Like the movie director?
人物の記憶を読み取り、対象者の複製体を作り出していると考えられている。
Wow. So through memory reading. Okay.
アインザームのような類似性を持つ魔物はいるが、
Einzyme. Oh, so Einzyme's like the weaker version.
思った実力も魔力も技術さえも模倣した完璧な複製体だ。霊落の応募が未踏破である。
I appreciate these dictionary terms and explanation.
このダンジョンを試験会場に。
複製体は自分と互角の相手だ。犠牲を出さずに。
Is the proctor's name Sense or Sensei? Sensei?
チームワークが必要になる。
Cold-headed self-analysis and teamwork.
平和主義者の彼
Keywords.
女らしい試験内容だ。
Oh, so she is a pacifist. Quick pause. I want to write on the theme of Labyrinth, which is, again, the psyche, the subconscious, what we are unaware of. And the reason why a lot of us requires professional help, and that's what therapy is, in the simplest, oversimplified term, is unbiased witness. All of us are boggled with different conditioning and biases growing up based on our upbringing, skin tone, everything in between. That's why we need an unbiased witness who's an accredited professional, in my case, a psychotherapist, to share some of the insights, the blind spots that we do not see ourselves. Because our perception of the self is often distorted. And that's what the proctor was saying in that dialogue. He's saying that to pass this test of Labyrinth, you need astute self-assessments or cold-headed self-assessments, which means objective, which is inherently impossible with self-analysis. How can you be objective with the subjectivity of our self-analysis? Second thing, teamwork. And we saw that in the last episode towards the end, and I'm sure the remaining of this episode will talk further about the importance of teamwork. But I want to talk about the undertone of this perfect replica. In our modern terms, we call that doppelganger, right? It's when you see like a universal twins, not the actual biological twinships, but these doppelganger twinships where you look identical, but you're different skin color, you've never met each other, and you live like thousands of miles apart. The doppelganger is actually German. And I know it's ironic for me to talk about German origins because I mispronounce pretty much every name there is. But hey, y'all, I'm the king of overanalysis and mispronunciation. Here we are. Doppelganger in German actually means two things: double walker or a knight or ghost walker. I want to talk about the latter definition, ghost walker. And don't ask me how I know this information, random knowledge from the past. Ghost walker implies the ghost. It's not quite real. It's a facade of ourselves. And that's what these perfect replicas are. And how do you defeat the ghosts of the past? You have to accept all of yourselves. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The imperfections, the shadow selves that we are unproud of, that we do not want to confront. But I'm pretty sure this episode will talk about to defeat the perfect replicas, you must have high self-awareness, great teamwork, like what the proctor said, but also acceptance of ourselves. We truly have to master self-awareness to defeat these doppelgangers, or known as ghost walkers, according to the German origin. So I think that's like the second layer, and that's also the same concept as the psychological phenomena of doppelganger phenomenon, which means to know ourselves, we must do the work, because we will project what we lack onto other people, the insecurities, the work that is left for us to do will get projected. And that's the reason why one of my favorite adages is hurt people, hurt people. We have to do the work to interrupt either intergenerational trauma patterns or whatever traumas that we are not happy about. Because we don't get to control trauma. That's why it is called trauma. It happens to us without our consent. But the doppelganger phenomenon, and I think the underlying theme of this entire episode, is to know thyself. We have to work on ourselves first and foremost. Oh, here comes doppelganger of Frieren. Wow! Oh,
さてどうしたもの
how is Dunkin' Donuts gonna fight against Frieren, another donut lover? This is the fight of a century between two donut lovers, huh? Ubel and Lance. Oh, did they take away his bottle?
分身魔法の専門家としての意見が聞きたいんだけど、いいかな？
僕の名前はラントだって言っているだろう。まあ、
Is Lance actually hurt? I guess this is his true self, not a clone.
どの程度まで完璧な私のコピーだと思う？
ユーベル、君ってさ、
Great question.
戦いの最中でも饒舌なタイプでしょ。黙ったら死んじゃうような。
Quick pause. The reason why Ubel, I think, is chatty even during combat is because of her empathy magic. To empathize with someone, you have to have a conversation, because conversation humanizes one another. And of course, the very important of active listening and compassionate listening. So you need conversation and compassionate listening, which are the conditions to empathize with someone. And that's the reason why I think Ubel is very chatty during combat.
よく観察してるね。そうだね。死んじゃうかも。
Oh.
物静か
Wow,
だ。
Ubel is very extroverted, huh?
記憶や人格まではコピーしていないってことかな。
多分喋れないだけだ。
Wait, Lance never answered her question.
敵の時、あれは僕の懐から脱出用ゴーレムの瓶を抜き取った。
Oh, that was so fast.
なるほど。
こちらに対する知識も
So personality has been copied and memories.
追撃してこないのは君のソルガニールを警戒しているから。
それか、いたぶるのを楽しんでいるかだね。
笑えないね。
Is that the personality of Ubel? Because she's not really a psychopath, as I analyzed in the last episode.
メガネくんさ、このままじゃ長くないよ。
そうだね。
最後に一ついいかな。
Land is very, very calm.
メガネくんって本物？
さあね。
I was wondering that too. Another great question.
私の瓶使いなよ。
それは君が生き残るためのものだ。
That's empathy.
ちょっと待っていてね。瓶を取り返してくる。
Four eyes. His name is Lance. So before Ubel kicks some ass, I want to analyze what Lance said in passing. Ubel is like, are you the real you? Because he is the master of clone magic, as established. And he says something extremely interesting. He says, who knows? And this is actually, again, going into the psychological phenomena of doppelganger once again, as I mentioned earlier. Who knows? Am I a clone? Am I a clone of a clone? Or am I the real me? I think Lance, yes, he's the master of a clone magic. And because of that, his physical safety has been reassured quadruple times. No one really knows where his true self is. Maybe his true self never entered the second part of this dungeon. Maybe his true self is hiding somewhere in a hotel with this guaranteed safety, because we don't know what the limitations of his clone magic yet in terms of distance, mana presence, and so on. But that's why he said, who knows? Because I think he is getting lost with his own identity because he's been pretending to be himself for so long. And to avoid getting lost with his own clone magic, it begs the same question of the doppelganger phenomena and the symbolic theme of this labyrinth. Do you know thyself? How well does Lance know himself? Does he know himself to a point on absolute terms that he will never get lost? But it sounds like he is getting lost. That's why he said, who knows? Very interesting.
まあ、距離を詰めてくるよね。ソルガニールの
So Ubel knows herself really, really well.
冷めること。
Limitations. Wow, same moves. Wow.
実力が互角なら勝ち負けは運で決まる勝負は嫌いだ。
Wow. Does Ubel technically count as a melee mage? Because the slicing is closest 5 meters, I believe.
見たぶりはしょうがないね。
Extension nihilism. Ooh. The binding spell.
や
No way. No way!
そっちの方がもっと運が悪かったみたいだ。
Lands, let's go. Nice. Great teamwork. That's impeccable team chemistry right there.
ふん、やっぱり瓶も偽物だったんだ。
Oh, interesting. That was a clone.
瀕死の僕が分身だと分かっていたんだな。なぜ死に急ぐような真似
Wow.
をした？
メガネくんが来てくれると確信したからかな。
Wow.
僕がそんなお人よしに見えたのか。
いや、全然。というか、そんなことどうでもいい。メガネくんはさ、私の瓶を受け取ろうとしなかった。自分のせいで誰かが死ぬのが嫌なんでしょ？
Okay. Baseline compassion.
状況を作った。
Interesting.
ありがとうね、メガネくん。
Four eyes.
そうか、それはよかったな。そろそろ共感できそうか？
まだ時間はかかるかな。
Not quite. Yep, not quite. She hasn't figured him out yet. So with the pause scene of us looking at the backside of Lands and Ubel, I know a lot of people ship them. So this is for you guys. So you guys can admire the back scene, the back of the backs of Lands and Ubel. I want to talk about their team chemistry, their team dynamic, and their similarities. So Ubel and Lands, they're both extremely analytical, or in other words, cold-headed self-analysis, which is what the Proctor said in the earlier scene. Because yes, Land's clone was dying, but obviously it's a clone of his own memories, personalities, behavior patterns, and so on. And so the fact that Land's clone was so calm under pressure of the seemingly life and death scenario, even though it was a clone, it actually projects and represents Land's true analytical calmness. And we've seen that through and through since the May tournament has begun. Second thing, like Ubel said, Land is, yes, very analytical, seemingly cold and aloof, non-approachable, but he does have his baseline moral compass. He wouldn't anyone die because of his cause or his faults. That's why he rejected Ubel's offer of giving that bottle as a safety net, which represents, again, Land's true personality. Analytical, but he is empathetic as a person, as a baseline, which is a mirroring, pun intended, of Ubel. As I said, Ubel is not really a psychopath, although she does exhibit some of the ASPD, antisocial personality disorder traits. And remember, guys, just because you exhibit some traits doesn't mean you have a full-blown disorder. Not everyone that has traits of ASPD are automatic sociopath. That's not true. You can have some traits without being eligible for the disorder. Case in point, a lot of very, very competent neurosurgeons, CEOs, lawyers, and so on, they have antisocial traits. That's why they're so calm under pressure. They can do life and death surgeries for 28 hours straight and so on. But they're not sociopathic. Right? So there's a spectrum and there's a threshold to be eligible for the full-blown diagnosis. So that's what Ubel is. She has some traits, but she is compassionate and she's very humanistic, surprisingly so. How do we know that? Because her magic itself requires empathy. And as someone mentioned in the earlier episodes, the type of magic they cast and utilizes, it's a manifestation and represents their personalities and their sense of self. So based on the type of magic they uses, for example, Verbal.
Calm down, let's not let your heart. Heroes.
He uses binding magic, which means he doesn't have to kill people unless it's necessary. But when it's necessary, the binding allows him to kill his enemies easier. But when it's unnecessary, he doesn't have to kill them. So that's Verbel's personality. Necessary killing, a war veteran who's trying to change himself for better and who's trying to stop the incessant killing of needlessness. And here Ubel is the same way. So Ubel is very calculative, very cold, very analytical, but also has this underlying baseline of compassion and empathy. And they're extremely, extremely similar. And the last thing I would say to close on my analysis is Ubel's existential nihilism. I talked about that in, I think, episode 20 or 21. But again, Len was like, why were you going after your death, knowing that that was a clone that was dying? And she said, because I knew you'd come save me. Everything she said might be valid. She created this scenario where Lance has to come to your rescue. That's very possible and most likely true. But the underlying is she also said, I hate luck-based encounters or any scenarios that involves luck. Do you know what type of people doesn't like luck? Because luck is happenstance, which means chance, which means uncontrollable. It's people who seek absolute certainties all the time. But does absolute certainty exist in this life and trippy experience of uncertainties? No. What is the only absolute certainty we are aware of with high degree of confidence? Death. Death is the constant, and death is without a doubt one of the few absolute certainties within this life that's filled with uncertainties. And Ubel seeks death because it is constant. And that's the existential nihilism. And that's why she said, I hate luck because it is uncertain. But that's the theme of Labyrinth and this second part of the Mage Tournament. It is filled with uncertainties. And when you're facing your perfect replica, do you know yourself enough to detect your own weakness? Because only people who are self-aware enough, like Ubel, has a chance at 1-to-1 combat. Otherwise, you will need to require teamwork. But then Lan's and Ubel's beautiful team chemistry, which allowed them to defeat Ubel's fake perfect replica, is their trust with each other. Or I guess more specifically, Ubel's trust in Lan's that he would come to her rescue ultimately, which he did. So to close it out, this is what it means. Knowing ourselves is the first condition. It's very important to cultivate self-awareness. But that once we do that, we also need to rely on one another, because no one can walk this path of life by ourselves. Life, this game of life, this trippiness, this uncertainties of life is not a one-man sport. This is a team sport, just like this second part of the Mage Tournament.
だいぶ最深部に近づいてると思うんだけどね。
Meanwhile, Frieren and Fern and Sensei or Sans are still very casually strolling, exploring the dungeons, paying homage to Himo the hero.
し尽くしたと思いますが。
Did they though? Frieren's thinking. It's rare to see her thinking face.
この壁の奥に隠し部屋がある。
Wow, that mana presence detection. Oh, look at her happy face.
ひょっとすると珍しい魔導書が眠っている可能性も。
Frieren says that all the time. That's her go-to excuse.
にもありませんでしたし。確かにね。でも構造はずだから。
Frieren the architect? How much knowledge does she have? Frieren is almost never wrong. Wow. Did they unlock like a hidden level? Will there be a hidden boss? Wow. Dude, I bet the proctor also didn't know about this. The joy of exploration, guys. This is exactly what Himo the hero tried to tell us. Enjoy the journey. Don't get too fixated and caught up at the goals. Goals will always be there. Enjoy the journey. Wow, a hidden layer. It's also very rare to see Fern being impressed by Frieren. She's always scolding Frieren.
ているな。これほど保存状態のいい統一王朝期の壁画は初めて。
Unified Dynasty era. What's the unification of? Wow. That's the goddess on the side? Aw, Frieren's so happy. All the explorations and paying homage to Himo the hero paid off.
本当に順調すぎるぐらい
They're creating once in a lifetime, very cherishable memories because they let go of the goals and they are focusing on the process, the adventure itself. They ran away, huh? They retreated.
的にこの先の広間を越えれば迷宮の最深部だ。
それで
あれが陣取ってもう半日になる。
That thing. Aha! Oh, my doppelganger, says Frieren.
面白くなってきたダンジョン攻略は
Her voice changed.
完璧な複製体か。確かにあれは私と同等の力を持
The
っ
donut lovers unite. The true donut lovers, Frieren and Duncan.
ない限り最深部へたどり着けん。何か手立てはあるか。
そうだね。あれがもしも私を完全に再現したものだとしたら弱点は生身の魔法使いと同じかな。
格上の魔法
What's the weakness?
高速魔法か精神操作魔法だ。
どちらにも耐性があるけれどもね。
気は生まれるかもしれん。
Oh,
お前
she's resistant to both.
倒せるはずだ。そういう小細工は得意だろう。
得意というほどではありませんが、では失礼して。
もう付き合っちゃえよ。
What's this? Are they detecting any weakness?
高速魔法が通用しませんね。いい匂い。普通は大き
She's hugging. Frieren's hugging. Aww.
次は私の目を見てください。
Oh, very mesmerizing. Cool purple eyes. Wow, the mana gap is too big. Wow.
あらあら。
本当に両方とも耐性があるようだな。
Oh, all right. So quick pause, just because Fern, her over jealous tendency or possibly overprotective tendency made her pull back Frieren from her. And she could be overly jealous, like what viewers pointed out in the earlier series. But I think in this case, I think it's more strategic. Frieren might be giving away her vulnerabilities strategically away through this exchange. So Fern is like, oh, that's enough, because Fern is protecting Frieren because she doesn't want Frieren to give her weaknesses. Because who knows, after the second part of the tournament, they are probably going to become enemies. So I just want to shout out to Fern's protective tendencies and her growth as a mage. As some viewers pointed out as well, this is an evolution and a journey of Fern going from a prodigy who just overpowers her opponents, but through this mage tournament, she's learning about combat intelligence. She's getting more flexible and more strategic, which is beautiful to see. Another thing I just want to highlight before we continue the second part of this episode is Frieren's subtle flex. She's like, huh, interesting. If she's a perfect replica of me, that means she must have similar weaknesses. It's a flesh and bone version of me. But she's like, that's going to be tricky because as Ricker pointed out, restrain magic or hypnosis magic are usually effective against more powerful mages. To that, Frieren says so casually, the nonchalance, whoops, I'm immune to both, right? And that's what the detection revealed as well. But one last thing I would say is I wonder how many viewers gloss over this, because again, I'm the king of overanalysis and overthinking. Did you notice how for a lot of other parties, the perfect replicas they had to fight against is in a teammate form? Like the one that Verbal fought against is the entire team, right? And I'm not sure if Lens and Ubel also fought against both of them or just one. But at least in Duncan's case, the entire team of Duncan fought against one, which is Frieren. I think that is a replica of Frieren's internal reality in some senses. Frieren has come a tremendous journey in terms of her emotional openness, clicking a lot of the emotional concepts and significance of the past that she shared with 10 years journey with Himo the hero, Aizen the warrior, Heitzer the bishop, to now with Fern and Stark, and Zine, who departed for his own journey. But I think deep inside, it's very hard for Frieren to empathize and relate to other people, except for elves. Because one, she's of a different species, and 2, she represents eternal youth. Youthful, but eternal nonetheless. She's an immortal being. And you can only empathize so much cognitively and emotionally without some sort of a resemblance or similarities. So I think the fact that there is only one perfect replica of Frieren represents, in some senses, the nature of her solitude, the deep-seated loneliness, but also how Frieren has come such a tremendous way from a party of one for 500 years, meeting Himmel the hero and enjoying the journey of 10 years by defeating the Demon King, and now ultimately blossoming into this secure caregiver, this beautiful home base, emotional safety net for her party of Stark and Fern. But I think it's extremely interesting that there is only one replica of Frieren that Duncan's party had to face.
精神防御の構築は複雑
Is she resistant or immune? Very different.
のようです。精神魔法の専門家なら脆弱性をつけるかもしれません。
受験者の中で心当たりは
But are they able to hypnotize a replica? Aren't they made out of stones? I feel like they'll be immune. How do you hypnotize something that doesn't have consciousness?
正直ここまで来られるかどうか。それに
So
大
there's
前
a
提として
hypnotist,
精神操作
hypnosis expert.
と通用しません。果たして
That's exactly what I'm saying. Do they have minds?
いるかどうか。
Very true.
ま
How do you replicate consciousness?
さあのじゃ
Whoa.
が一級魔法使いゼンゼと同等の力を持っていると考えて間違いあるまい。
It's a replica of sense.
潜伏するにも限界
Oh, so the proctors are first class mages.
倒せると思うのかブライ。ライとドゥンスとはこのダンジョンの中ではまともに戦えん。
そもそも現代魔法がダンジョン戦闘に適している
And who's this Pringles looking dude with that Pringles mustache?
今度のダンジョンが攻略された弊害じゃな。
Oh.
ソースを取られすぎ。
Good point.
攻撃魔法は自然物を利用したものが多くなった。無から物質を作り出すよりも。
Wow, this dungeon reveals another evolution and aspect of their magic transformation over time.
このダンジョン内でも無数の手段で戦えると考えていいじゃろう。わしの見立てでという数えるのも不可能なほどの膨大な数の糸を自在に変質させて操るという普通の人間とはかけ離れたイメージを持つ
Superhuman imagination.
に格上の魔法使いじゃ。正直ここまで逃げおせたのは
I love these explanations. It helps a lot with my context, filling the gap.
は頑張った。そもそもわしらは武闘派ではない。ここいらが潮時じゃろう。正直
Are they healer type or assistant type?
お前の声は通らないのか
確かに精神操作魔法
Oh, is she the hypnosis mage?
相手に高度な命令の条件を満たすのは無理じゃな。できるとすればせいぜいひざまずかせて隙を作る程度じゃ。それでも目を合わせて声をかけねば。
I'm pretty sure these replicas are immune to hypnosis. They don't have consciousness.
相手に心があればの話じゃが。
どのくらい時間を稼げば
15秒じゃ。というかそれが限界である。
This One Punch Man and Pringles wannabe are gonna create an opening. Let's see it.
今にわかる。
Whoa! Damn! Oh, she's pretty good.
全面展開しろ。現代魔法戦において質量で叩き壊すか技術でかいくぐるか手数で攻める輩は
Dang! Those hair become drills. Will be very good for construction work.
巨漢のような全面展開は15秒が限界だと考えていたがだが目はあったの。ひざまずけ
Very astute observation. It's not gonna work. Oh, shit.
なるほど。よくわかった。
Bro, it doesn't. Oh, I knew they don't have minds.
心の働きを精密に模倣しているだけじゃ。
Dude, I hope that didn't pierce through her heart. Is she dead? Break your bottles, dude.
しかないの。武闘派連中のところまで全力で逃げろ。わしは潮時と言った通りもう帰る。痛いのはもういい。
Oh, nice.
便利じゃの。
Wow.
のか。
Wow, these golems are like first class level, huh? Wow.
俺たちも逃げるぞ。
I love those butt cheeks. Shout out to the Madhouse studio.
太郎、合格者を出すつもりなんて初めからないんだよ。
If they stuck with Duncan's party, dude, they would have been able to wait for the arrival of Frieren and they would have a chance. But now, this is a cost of not pausing before thinking.
が少ないからね。
So they're still analyzing Duncan's favorite sports.
技になるだろうけどね。
できるのか。
Look at Frieren. She's having so much fun. So before we continue, I just want to highlight the humility of Frieren. For someone of Frieren's caliber, for her to say, I don't know, demands an unfathomable amount of humility. Because at this point, Duncan, and I think everyone else, knows the gray mage status of Frieren. She's the last gray mage. And it's like when one of the most prominent neuroscientists or Nobel Prize winning scientist or a massive CEO of a massive company, when an employee or someone, air quote, lower than their status, asks them a question, for them to say, I don't know, is so impressive because Frieren truly knows herself, which is the objective and what is required to defeat the labyrinth, to know thyself. Frieren does just that. Frieren knows herself so well that she's not ashamed of admitting what she does not know. She has accepted all of her good, the bad, and the ugly, and all of her imperfections as a result. So beautiful shout out to Frieren. And the last thing I'll say is the level of team chemistry and analysis that's brewing behind the gates before they face Frieren the replica, right? Is Duncan's strategy in the beginning when he urged everyone to wait and gather and work as a team has come into fruition. Duncan's thinking approach, methodical, observation-first approach, which was also highlighted by Frieren in the first part of the Mage tournament, is coming to fruition and shining once again. So Duncan truly is a great principled strategist. And whatever he said would have been helpful if other people followed him doing so. But the last thing I would say is the escape of Eder, that hypnosis mage, who learns that these replicas have no minds. And this is, again, going back to the doppelganger phenomenon, right? Unless we truly know ourselves and the limitations of ourselves, how can we defeat the perfect air quote replica of ourselves? She fortunately survived and she was able to escape death because she had teammates, right? The importance of teamwork, another symbolic theme of this episode. But at the same time, she learns that you cannot hypnotize entities without minds. And this talks about the importance of consciousness. What is consciousness? Where is consciousness? Are two of the questions of the century in the realm of neuroscience. A lot of neuroscientists, and the pinnacle of research within the realm of neuroscience in the modern sense, is learning more about consciousness. What is it? Where is it? And that parallels with what Duncan said. We still lack so much information because we have scraped just the surface, just the tip of the iceberg of what consciousness truly entails. And I think that's a beautiful parallel to show that with science or magic, yes, we have come a long way, but there are still so many things we don't know yet. And that's the beauty of discovery. That's the beauty of self-growth. That's the beauty of learning, expanding what we know by shrinking what we don't know. At the same time, maintaining the intellectual humility that Frieren has embodies perfectly. Right? Because again, do you guys know yourselves? Because self-awareness has to be the first step. Beautiful, beautifully done. Do you think there's any relationship or correlation between Sense or Sensei's superhuman imagination and her being a pacifist? Because like the hypnosis mage said, for her to control and manifest magic through her hair, which is literally uncountable, she must have superhuman imagination. I think that checks out the logic. So what I'm thinking is maybe because of her vivid and superhuman imagination is so powerful, I think she's super considerate of everything there is. And that's probably why she's a pacifist. She's against violence, against any creatures, and she's all about non-violence because she has such a great superhuman imagination that she's able to visualize the intangible and many things that most people wouldn't be able to be conscientious about. In other words, Sensei or Sense is too overly conscientious, which is, I think, also very interesting. Or am I just typically overthinking? So we're seeing the teamwork. Yep. You see that? This team is facing their entire replica, but Duncan's team only faced one replica of Frieren, which is exactly what I said. Great teamwork, though. Great teamwork. They're doing the same thing. Oh, someone's up there too. Oh, nice. Verbel's combat intelligence shining through. Wow! Headshot. Nice. Because Verbel has actual experience fighting demons. Nice. Very, very astute also in terms of combat. Is Duncan's about to fist fight again? UFC Duncan?
フリーレン様を殺せるかもしれません。そう。はい。じゃあ、
What?
作戦を立てようか。
Dude, that was a plot twist I did not expect. Fern, in such a well-mannered mannerism, says, "Oh, I think I have a way." Like that shy students raising their hand in a classroom for the first time. But what I want to zoom in and close my analysis for episode 24 is once again, Frieren's incredible humility. Frieren's ego was not bruised. She did not take great offense that how dare my mentee dare to say she could defeat my perfect replica. Me, a gray mage, the demon slayer. No, Frieren has zero ego. Frieren took zero offense. Instead, with her incredible humility and curiosity, she just said, oh, okay, let's come up with a strategy. That's such a beautiful demonstration of her incredible humility, which is what I've emphasized in the last 10 minutes or so, but also the reason why Frieren is the last gray mage. Yes, she was able to defeat the Demon King because she was able to visualize an era of peace. But I think the deeper than that is Frieren is able to become the last known gray mage is because of her unsatiable, unstoppable curiosity and humility. Some of the smartest and the most achieving peak performers I know, and there are very well-known memoirs and biographies out there, is their incredible humility. Because the moment we stop being humble is the moment we stop growing. We have to accept all of our imperfections to grow and reinvent ourselves. And even that quick dialogue and exchange between Frieren and Fern shows Frieren's incredible mastery of her emotional growth and maturity. Such an awesome episode. Wow. And can we take a moment of silence to prepare grieving? Because there's only 4 episodes left at the end of this beautiful, beautiful show. But until then, if you enjoy my analysis, smash a thumbs up. Check if you're subscribed because you don't want to miss the next episode. Reach out if you have any questions. And as always, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. It means more than what you know. And as always, I hope to catch you in the next week's video for Death Note and Frieren Saturday. Until then, Peace.